Now, there's been plenty of reaction to that decision, and also what Donald Trump eventually and ultimately had to say after this. Let's have a look at some of the reaction on this side of the border. Canada-U.S. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc saying on social media that the decision reinforces that the tariffs are unjustified, but says critical work lies ahead to support businesses and workers affected by steel, aluminum, and auto tariffs. Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, which has hit hard by Trump's auto tariffs in particular, calling the Supreme Court's decision an important victory, but adds that the fight against remaining tariffs must continue. And federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre says the ruling is a step in the right direction, but is calling on Canada to do what it can to focus on what it can control, saying, quote, "Our mission must be an affordable, safe, and self-reliant Canada. As always, Conservatives stand ready to work with the government." So that's a sample of some of the reaction here. Joining me now for more is James Blanchard, former U.S. ambassador to Canada. Mr. Ambassador, really appreciate you joining us today. You know, I want to get your overall assessment. This decision, it was what we were mostly expecting, I think, initially, too. But what was your reaction when we finally heard from the Supreme Court today?
Oh, I wasn't surprised. I think most lawyers here in the United States, probably Canada, they expected the court would do what it did. I'm just relieved because the court has appeared to bend over backwards to support Mr. Trump on so many things, making him immune from criminal prosecution, which is contrary to what's going on in the United Kingdom, I might add. So we're relieved that they did what we thought they would do under the law. No president has ever invoked what they call the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. No one has done that. It wasn't justified. So it's good for our trading partners. It's good for Canada. It's good for my state of Michigan. Congress really has the power to do tariffs, and he has bypassed Congress. And so I think maybe the Republican majority will wake up and say, if we want tariffs, then it needs to be done in an orderly fashion, on a rational basis, taking into account our own best interests. I will say, with Canada, it's interesting. The U.S. has a trade surplus with merchandise, manufacturing, agriculture, autos. The only thing we don't have a surplus in is energy, and we need that energy. So for the president to suggest that Canada is ripping us off when we actually have a positive balance and we need the energy is really puts him in an alternate universe that's really not reality. And it's like saying, this is the other thing, that we need to drop the steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada. We have an integrated steel and aluminum industry. In fact, until recently, the head of the United Steelworkers was a Canadian. I mean, and there's no way you can argue that Canada is a national security threat to the United States because of the production of steel and aluminum. So we still need to do more, as I think most Canadian trade lawyers understand, to build back some respect and reliance here. I mean, we have not been a reliable partner, and people in Europe know that. People know it all over. So this is a big victory for reality, and frankly, for our Constitution and our Congress, which should be exercising its authority here.
Yeah, you know what, and have to agree, you know, in Canada, we've been talking a lot about, in particular, steel, aluminum, the businesses, and you know, a lot of them, the workers that have lost their jobs, the layoffs that have happened in the auto sector too. You know, we have seen, especially in Ontario, the way that those tariffs, in particular, those sectoral tariffs, have impacted the auto industry. For you, and to be able to, you know, is it realistic now that we could see that change? I know you're calling for some of those tariffs now to be removed. It certainly doesn't feel that the president is going to go that way, but if given you know, the possibility to, you know, should Congress be able to act on this, or where do you see this moving forward, because Canada and the U.S. are still going to remain, you know, just as a matter of geography, are still going to remain such tight partners?
Well, I don't know yet. I mean, I think the Congress and the president and the White House, the administration needs to digest this. Jay should not be surprised. Look, the people behind these tariffs are really crackpot economists. Let's be real here. And they have tried to convince Mr. Trump that by levying tariffs on everyone, he could someday replace our income tax. That is totally unrealistic. They tried to convince Mr. Trump that tariffs are paid by foreign countries who are, quote, ripping us off. when indeed they're paid by our businesses and our consumers, or really a combination of both. Tariffs are a tax on our people in the United States, and they harm relations with Canada or with the European Union or anyone else, Mexico, Asia. And so we have a problem here. Mr. Trump is in an alternate universe. He's got advisors who are not, they're really crackpots, basically. He doesn't have serious trade lawyers around him like he did in his first term. Remember, he bragged that the new CUSMA is the best trade agreement in the history of the United States, and that NAFTA was the worst one, when indeed CUSMA is simply NAFTA too.
Right.
So our administration is not dealing with reality. That's why Congress has begun to have some guardrails. You will note recently, in a bipartisan vote, Congress passed a resolution opposing the tariffs on Canada. That's a really good sign. And now this Supreme Court decision is another sign. It's a big victory, and it's a huge loss and back to reality for Mr. Trump.
Can we talk about CUSMA for a second, too? Because, you know, impacting negotiations, clearly, we've had, you know, varying opinions, I think, from whether it's been trade lawyers or other pundits, at least for now, but whether this decision from the Supreme Court is going to be a good thing in the fact that Canada likely will have at least a little bit more leverage, but also what it could mean for Donald Trump, depending on what kind of mood he's going to be in and his trade negotiations are going to be in. What do you think it will mean, you know, come, you know, the conversations are underway, but ultimately this review that will happen in the summer?
No, I think it's helpful. I think it'll back to reality. I think it's more likely to cause a focus on modernizing CUSMA in a way that's good for all three countries. You know, again, Mr. Trump does not like multilateral agreements. That's why he doesn't like the UN or NATO or the European Union. So I know he would love to have bilateral agreements so he can try to push everybody around, bully them. But I think this may allow members of Congress, rational members of the cabinet, not all of them are, to convince Mr. Trump to try to deal with the real world on trade and with our allies. It's so important. You know, we're no longer viewed as a reliable ally by all the people that we worked with all these years and really defended after World War II. I grew up, right? I mean, I grew up, look, I'm in my early 80s. I am grateful for 80 years of NATO, of national security, of United Nations, of our work in Europe and with Canada. And Canada was a partner every step of the way. I feel blessed to have grown up in an era of security and prosperity. I hate to see a president, any president, put that asunder. God, that's just tragic. So we're all going to have to rally around reality, get some new people in office. I think the Democrats will score big victories in November. But we have to contain and put guardrails on the president. And I think this court is beginning to do that. Congress is beginning to do that. And our Federal Reserve is beginning to do that. So that's all good news. And when it's good news for America or Michigan, I think it's good news for Canada.
Certainly fair. James Blanchard, former U.S. ambassador to Canada. Really appreciate you taking some time for us today, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.